1. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Corey Edwards with Adobe, and I'm sitting here with our next guest, David Polinchock, who's the director of the PwC Experience Center.
That's right.
So glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. We've got a great partnership. We've had a great relationship between the two organizations, and super glad to have you here in our physical manifestation of a think tank.
This is great. Yeah.
And it's proceeding on actually tomorrow. We're going to hold a longer think tank event where we're going to kind of dig into some of these topics in a more formal forum. But we thought we would bring we put the tank in the think tank today here on the street at AdWeek.
I'm glad it wasn't the think dunk tank. I was a little bit happy about that today.
The viewers might have preferred that.
That's true. If you don't answer the question
and
right.
you could have had a little fish swimming around in the tank as well. So talk a little bit more about what you're doing with the PwC Experience Center.
So the Experience Center is a fairly new group at PwC, and it's really looking at how do we take the best of the agency environment and the best of the consulting environment and bring them together so that we can offer really long-term solutions. You know, in the agency world, both because of how clients feel and how agencies are designed, it's really you come in, you kind of are tactical, and you leave, whereas with PwC and the consulting business they really are looking at how does this change your business. So it's not simply, well, here's a new website or here's a new app that you can use. It's how does that app impact everything across your business, whether it be your accounting and your financial information, as well as what it's doing for the customers of the brand. So we really do get to play in a much broader range of activities than you would normally do in a straight up agency.
So one of the things that I've noticed that PwC Experience Center talks about is this ecosystem, the right ecosystem of bringing together talent and environments and solutions.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how those work together and what's the importance of those?
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things we were talking a little bit before we started here, as we become more digital, for me, the physical becomes more important. So part of what the philosophy of the Experience Center is really how do you create a physical environment where people want to co-create, where there's opportunities to serendipitously run into people and suddenly a new idea is born, where you don't have that when it's the media department's over there and this group is over there and those people don't really get together and talk to one another. So we're really looking at changing the whole physical environment, and in fact we're building our own office lab to see what does work look like in the future from a physical point of view. And of course talent is always the big issue with everybody. You can give anybody the best tools in the world, and if they don't have talent, it won't matter. As you can see, I'm an older gentleman, and I remember in those early days talking about new technologies and editing tools and cameras that didn't cost $4 million, and people said, well, aren't you worried that everybody's a filmmaker now? No, you know, giving me a camera doesn't make me a filmmaker. There's still that skill set. So we're really looking, you know, I have people I know at PwC from long ago, friends of mine who said, why would we hire you? You know, we're looking at a whole new realm of people that come to a company like PwC offering all kinds of skills. And of course, what we're delivering. You know, how are we creating new tool sets in this congested world with a lot going on? How do we give people real utility from the things we build that make people's life better?
One of the things that you told me earlier that I really liked the idea of when we were talking about the Experience Center and we were talking about the evolution in technologies, what's made available to your children and my children. And we were talking about how it's impacting imagination and creativity. Can you talk about the future of imagination and the thinking that PwC Experience Center has around that?
Sure, and you know it's a really interesting thing because it goes both ways. On the one hand, kids are being given so many new tools today that they really can create everything. You know, when I was a kid, if I looked at TV and said, this show is terrible, I can make my own TV show, I'd need an uncle who owned a studio, who was married to somebody who worked at a network.
Yes.
And now my 15-year-old can throw YouTube videos up from her cell phone without even thinking about it.
And get the same reach.
And get the same reach. So on the one hand, they have this incredible tool set where they can do everything. On the other hand, it's fascinating that there's I don't see them being as wondered about the world. Like, again, when I was a kid, it was like, we could move and live on Mars. That was like, we said that with wonder, and you talk to my daughter, like, yeah, we'll live on Mars. Of course we will. It's like, what are you talking about? And it's really interesting, and there's also this very fascinating school of thought that looked at things like radio, right? The early days of storytelling via radio, where you as the listener created the entire story. So the radio show said, he slowly opened the door into the darkened room, and you and I both see completely different rooms. So our imagination had to work. Now there's this interesting thing where everything is given to us. Are we being as imaginative?
So you talk about how with the change in imagination, it's impacting the kinds of experiences that brands need to create for their customers. Totally. And I know that one of the things that you've talked about was the need for brands to transform their stories. And maybe that is that related to the fact that we're seeing this evolution in imagination?
I think definitely yes. I think where the early days products could just do what they do, right? I drink a cola, just refreshes me. I buy this product, I go to the bank, I can just do my banking. Now, because there's so many choices to us, we want to participate with brands that can either tell a great story, put me in a great story, or let me share a great story, right? So I don't want to just, a number of years ago, and this is not, we're neutral, I'm not, but being down at the Coca-Cola Experience in Atlanta and reading letters from soldiers in World War II about what it meant when Coca-Cola got delivered. Those were stories. Kids in the trenches writing, I know what I'm fighting for. It's America and Coca-Cola. That's a story.
They create an amazing experience. I was there twice, actually,
Is
twice
that,
last year, going through
it?
Coca-Cola World, and the narrative that they have created, the imagination they have behind it, it's a beautiful story.
That's right, and it's something that you can get emotionally attached to. You can say, I want to be part of this story. So and that's where brands just offer product, then I'm mainly competing on price. And that's not, we don't believe that's a good place to compete.
So do you have advice on how to make that story come alive? Every company is selling either a product or they're selling a service.
That's right.
And they're trying to find a story, and they're probably listening saying, yeah, I've heard this over and over again, but how do I make it happen? How do I take the initial step to find the story that is going to penetrate to the heart of the customers so they feel it?
Sometimes it's really going back to your history. We worked with Tums many years ago in a previous life, and during our workshop around storytelling, we said, okay, so how did this come to be, right? Because as an acid reduction product, they sell that they reduce acid, right, which every other product does. So we said, 100 years ago, there was a pharmacist and he loved to go on cruises, but his wife got seasick and got an upset stomach, so he created Tums so that he could share something he loved with his wife who he loved. And we all looked at them like, and that's not a story you're telling? That's a story. It's about love. It's about people doing something for each other. Yeah, it reduces acid, makes your stomach feel better, but that's a cool story. So part of it might just be, where did you come from? What made you get started? Like, mainly brands got started for a reason.
Adobe, some logical connection.
Adobe didn't just show up one day. Somebody went, I'm having a problem doing this. Hey, I wonder if I made this tool, could I do this?
And then would it be helpful to other people?
And then would it be helpful to other people? And then you start to get that story, and people forget their past. We want to get away from that. We want to,
So if we can, David, I'd love to shift briefly to talk about technologies.
Sure.
The technologies that are ultimately helping to create these great experiences now. There are some technologies that receive a tremendous amount of hype.
Yeah.
Perhaps overhyped, some may be underhyped. But of all the technologies and the kind of the trends in the marketplace that you're seeing today, are there technologies, maybe a couple that you would point to and say, look, it's getting a tremendous amount of hype, but it's worth it, and
Right.
it's going to transform the experience.
Sure, you know, PwC has an entire tech group that's been tracking about 8 big trends. You know, things like IoT, which
Yep.
of course, once everything is connected, that will change how we live. Because of my background, I'm following particularly virtual reality and augmented reality. And I know everybody gets, you know, because they are really hyped now, and you should have been around in the 90s when I was doing it, when it was the biggest thing since sliced bread. And, you know, we're not getting the utility there yet. But it is one of those things that when my daughter gets a little bit older, she will use it every day. You know, you think about her as a student and being able to put on a VR headset and traveling to ancient Greece, not simply reading about it or watching a video of it.
It's like, I don't know if you had a chance to read Ready Player One.
Oh yeah, totally. Can't wait for the movie.
Right, so that is effectively the world they live in,
That's
right?
the world they live in,
where
right.
they physically live in a pretty rundown,
Trailer park.
post-apocalyptic world, and yet they live out their lives on a daily basis, from education to whatever,
That's right.
through their virtual reality lenses.
That's correct. And you'll see, you know, I mean, again, that's not like around the corner tomorrow,
No.
but we are going there. And the same thing with augmented reality. That ability to overlay information on top of the real world is huge. We're barely scratching the surface with that. So from an education experience, there was a group in Amsterdam that built an AR experience for high school students, where they could walk around Amsterdam in specific locations, put on the goggles, and see overlaid onto what it looked like today, what it looked like in the 1600s. It's a great tool.
Yeah.
Of course, I do joke about this a little bit because I have a 15-year-old daughter. You know, it'll be the future of Tinder. She'll walk into whatever place she goes to, and her Google Glass will facial recognition scan everybody and say, go talk to that person, whatever. I'm building the Daddy app, which simply rejects everybody. That's all my app does.
I need that app.
It's going to be a big app. It's going to be a big app.
Creating that I would like to have.
So I think, again, you know, you look at specific things. Tourism, how great would it be not to just look at a building, but to be able to experience that building and experience other people's stories. Another area I think is huge is, right, so we're in front of the Times Center. There's an official story of this building. You know, it was built in whenever it was built and whatever. But eventually, we'll be able to tag our own stories to this building. So when people come and visit it, they'll see our stories as well as the building story. It's huge potential for me.
I think one of the points here is that we're living in a world where the experience that a marketer can provide, it involves a couple of things, right? You've got a marketer that's designing the experience.
Right.
You've got the technology that is enabling that experience.
That's
You've got people consuming it.
That's right.
And all of these are ultimately moving beyond, for marketers, they're moving beyond, I'm going to send an email, I'm going to put a banner ad,
That's right.
I'm going to put a targeted tweet, and they're turning these into really, the technology is enabling this incredibly rich and relevant and personalized experience.
That's right.
So my question then is there, as you think about that,
Right.
kind of these future experiences, is there a steel thread that connects all of them, that is kind of it's the element that is in common with all of them, regardless of the technology
Yep.
you're using,
Yep.
but something that ultimately connects back to the customer?
We talk all the time about compelling, authentic, and relevant, right? So it's got to be a compelling experience. It's got to be something about it that makes me go, I want to do this. It's got to be relevant to me. You know, if you're delivering something I don't do heights, right? So you're delivering an experience that involves climbing on top of the building, not going to work for me, right? So it's got to be relevant to me. And it's got to be authentic, and that goes back to the storytelling, right? When you build these authentic stories, people want to be involved in them. And that's too many brands. There's way too much that we look at what somebody else has done and go, ooh, I got to do that. And don't look at, you know, back in the day, in the early days of the .com, you might remember things like BMW films. And they did a fantastic job at creating these really cool, long-form short videos that really told a story. And as soon as they hit, every client called every agency and said, get me one of those film things.
Yeah.
They weren't thinking about what it meant to them and how BMW really crafted the story and all. They just jumped into the tactic. when brands are really thinking, who am I authentically? What do I stand for? You can create those powerful stories that move across.
Well, David, thank you for your time.
You're
So
very
great to
welcome.
have you here in the tank. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, joined by David Polinchock, the director of the PwC Experience Center. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.